we come to the bridge. And the bridge is the space that I talk about gathering. The bridge is where, if you now know what the living system is, when we go back to that lemniscate, you're coming over to this side and you're saying, I've now realized this is what life is. So this one here, what we're basically talking about right at the start of the book when we're talking about the colonialism and everything else. So what it's saying to us is that until now, we have been doing our loops of living and being on this left-hand side of the lemniscate, right? We are constantly in a spiral. This tiny little lemniscate in that is who we are. And so we are evolving into something that is only a part of who we are, because all of this has been disconnected from us. Nature, everything else has been cut off from us. Hence, it's degradation, right? It's dying because we're not there, not a part of it. And all of our growing, all of our thinking of becoming conscious people has actually been in vain, because all we've ever done is tried to become conscious of our own self, not our whole self. So we're chasing around this idea of consciousness that really is only getting to humanity's more ego, because we're only finding ourselves. We're not finding all that we are, which is that space of even further consciousness, right? So here we are doing this little hamster wheel within a hamster wheel, not actually attached to our fullness, our truth. The fact that anyone would think that they'll find consciousness within that space, they're kidding themselves, because you're not a part of the whole thing, right? You're going to find consciousness as a part of the whole of life, as a part of the whole system, as a part of each other, as a part of the land and the sky and everything else, not just through this little loop where all you can discover is yourself and humanity and ego. We have to find ourselves as a part of all of this. And I bring that up simply because when we're then passing over from this side to come over to discover the rest of ourselves, we have to cross a bridge. We cross a bridge where we discover more of who we are on the other side. So in understanding then that what this bridge represents, it's where we scoop things up. We're coming over the other side. We're discovering life again. And on that bridge are all the pieces of the living system. And you're going to learn her values. And you're going to learn how she functions. And those things are through communion. They're through locality and how I make place, how I know my land and everything that's there again. And as you learn all these pieces, these are the things you're going to pick up and put in your basket to come over to this side for the first time and go, this is how I now want to live. It's like walking into Eden for the first time and you've got a new basket full of things. This is the rules I want to live by. These values, this part of life. And so we understand so many of the different pieces as play. Life is joyous. She is very creative. She is very spontaneous. She likes a laugh and to have fun and have that frivolity. That has to be a part of how we create and be a part of life, you know, being able to see the joy she must have in creating things with long snouts and tiny tails and big ears. And like you can see that she is full of joy in the things, the crazy things that she creates. And so being able to play with those things and recognize the joy that you must have of being able to have all of these different expressions of life around you. So these are all the things that we pick up on the bridge as we're going through. And the most important thing is when we get to the end of understanding what the living system holds and what it has and all her values, we come to the end of the book and there's two very big pieces about that. It says that there's two things that we need to do. Only two things. And if we do these two things, we allow ourselves to step back into all of that. And so they are two enormous things, granted, but they are two very simple things that we can do. And the first is we have to understand ourselves as sacred. We have to understand our sacredness. And that has never been something that we've really ventured into before. And I actually argue in the book that all of the self-help we've ever done has been done from a space of separateness. We've never known ourselves or done the work to know ourselves as a part of life. We've only known ourselves as human form, this person, and what my space is. So now the challenge is actually to go back to the beginning, which is really annoying for those people who've spent a gazillion hours in counselling and everything else, and all of a sudden it's like, shit, are you kidding me? I'm going to go back and do all this again, and now actually discover myself in amongst life as opposed to just me. But that's what we've never done before. It's like it's always, this self-help industry has been helping the self, not the self as a whole, not the self as a sacred, living, existing being as a part of all things. And to know ourselves as that is a completely different thing. To see ourselves in each other brings out a completely different capacity to relate to each other. Because I'm seeing myself, right? Like, you're me, I'm you. How can we relate? How can we hear each other? There is way to do that. If we see outside of just one need or one capacity, right? How do we do this together? How do we dance? And then doing that as a part of, I'm not separating myself and thank you, I'm this human now and here's my 10 carrots, thank you very much, grow me 10 more tomorrow, right? It's seeing yourself as part of life and unraveling yourself and that decolonization to being able to go, I'm a part of this whole. I am never an individual. Impossible. I am always a part of everything else that's around me. And who is that? And what is that? And really understanding that sacredness. But again, from that lemniscate point of view, we understand that we are doing that at the same time as living that. We are always unraveling and living and learning and being at the very same moment, which makes it even tougher, right? Because it's like, oh shit, that means I'm doing two things at once, and how am I going to really understand that and live that and be, but it's allowing ourselves, once we push that time and space out, I'm not in a rush. I don't have to have it all sorted this lifetime. I need to be the best me right now and honour who I am right now and be able to relate in the capacity that I can right now. I have time and space to become, just like the ridiculousness of us, of having packets of seeds and we feel like we've failed if in 2 weeks they haven't sprouted because that's what the packet says. And so we go, well, that's a failed thing. Or I was terrible because I didn't do this, right? That seed doesn't know your timing. It doesn't know this concept of 2 weeks. It knows nourishment. It knows warmth. It knows care. It knows relationality as to what's going to stir it to become. Just the same as us, right? Like, what's going to stir in me each day to become and unravel and grow and be within that whole span. And so it's an enormous thing because we are constantly then going through that cycle. And we've got to allow ourselves that. We've got to allow ourselves to be perfect at the same time as being continually becoming and growing and evolving through that each time. And once we allow ourselves to understand we are sacred and we do the constant work, if you are alive, you are still learning that. Full stop. Right? Like, that's what you're here to do, is to continually relate and understand our sacredness and be a part of life and nurture an allyship along the way. And how I live that is my expression of that, because it's that lived truth. I'm going to live my truth right now. Some people are living a much lower resonance of their truth because they're stuck in that system that's literally killing them and allowing them to kill others because of that pain. But they're no different to any of us that need to just come back over here and understand how sacred they are and that they're not going to have never nothing. They can be cared for and nurtured for and everything else if we all step into this space together. Which leads us to the last thing that we can do. And that is around wealth, which is WELLTH. Our wellness and our well-being placed together is our greatest asset. The wealth of who we are, now knowing we are sacred, means that we are living constantly as wealth with the land and with everyone else around us. So what I need to do to uphold my wellness and well-being coming through that sacred space means I'm considering that as a whole. So my wellness and well-being impacts your wellness and well-being. Nothing can be well if everything is not well. We are all in a state of dis-ease until we start to write that way, because everyone is holding some form of angst and pain that needs to be allowed to be released into growing and all the rest of it. So what do we do with that? We are working constantly with the land, her wealth, and what she grows is our wealth and what we give. Life is constantly in use of all things, because all things are a part of the system constantly and reusable. You know, there's not this thing of having to break things down. Everything is broken down. It's all there and it's all a part and it's all fluid. So sustaining our wealth as wellness and well-being, which I might point out, our sacred journey and our wealth journey are our full-time job. Knowing our truth and living that truth and honouring that back to the land, that's our full-time job. Over here in this system, that is not real. That's a system that is created that we are fitting into to build consumerism and more capitalism and everything else. The system that's happening over here that will completely sustain us and allow us to thrive needs only for us to recognise our connection with it and to sustain our wealth with it. It's this system over here that depletes us, that drives us to having disease, illness, broken pieces, broken minds, broken hearts, to fit into it and to sustain it and to be chewed up and spat out at the end of it. And to be told, you know what? If you work in this system long enough, when you get old enough, you can go and have a play and do all these things. Here's a pat on the back for you because you've been good in the system all this time. Thank you very much. You know, but I'm not even really going to look after you well. But that's your problem, right? You go do that after you've just given a whole life sentence to us. As opposed to how we do this in living and loving and finding our sacredness and really honouring our wealth. If we had the time and capacity to make that our full-time work of knowing who we are, offering that as our truth, and sustaining that from a mental and physical nutritional space constantly, that system is endless and will continue to flow in a fluid, eternal manner with us as a part of it. And it won't fail. It hasn't failed. It will continue to evolve and loop back to, if we allow ourselves to move past our skin, thinking that this is our greatest form, thinking that this is the greatest evolution we'll ever be, and allowing ourselves to sort of really become back into the other.